It's possible to use ARGV inside of a Nuke script. ARGV in the command line in pretty much every operating system is an array that carries the arguments in the command line. So what we're doing with this function inside TCL, inside Nuke, is we're pulling arguments from the command line into Nuke, which will then expand out to whatever the argument was outside on the command line. So we can use this for some pretty powerful stuff. Let's start wiring up a Nuke, sort of a template Nuke script that we can use in conjunction with this feature to make an adaptive Nuke script. Because this session of Nuke was not launched from the command line, ARGV0 and ARGV1 have not been defined, so hence they don't expand here. Now, this was an example where this would have created the base name of a file and the extension. But let's go ahead and use this just to define the file read path for a read node, and then the output path for our magic write node. Okay, let's start wiring up this template. The first thing I'm going to do is connect the write node to the read node that we have set up, because if we leave that connected, there's less chance of breaking the settings in the write node when we put the argument in there, the argv macro. So we're going to use argv1 to hold our output name, and I'm going to leave the extension here. So the way we'll make this work is with the assumption that we just give it the base name and path that we want to write the file to, and then the extension will always be .mov, and that will be in this magic write node. And let's change the name of this to argv, magic write node argv. So then hopefully this will keep all of our settings intact and won't break it. These are the same settings that were in the initial auto magic write node. And then we'll do the same for our read node. And we'll make the read path on this one be argv0. So that will be the first argument on the command line. And this one will assume that it could have any extension or whatever on it. Now, this will instantly break because this has not been defined, but that's okay. Let's save this out. So I'm going to say save as, and we'll version it up. Already had some prototypes there. And now we should have a script that can act as a macro or a container, a sort of generic template that we can read any sequence in and write a movie out from. There's one other piece that might be necessary for this to work, and it's something that's in the magic write node already, and that is this Python before render script. And let's take a quick look at that. I'm going to copy it here and paste it into a notepad so we can see it. By default, Nuke doesn't create the output directories for a file if it doesn't already exist. So if you try to run a write node and there is no landing spot for the file you're writing, the write node will basically just fail. Sometimes it'll even do it silently. It'll kind of run and seem like it's rendering, but really it isn't. So here's a little script that was in the documentation, the pipeline integration documentation in the Nuke manual. I've improved it a little bit. Let's walk through it here, and I'll walk you through each step. The first thing we do is create a function called createWriteDir. So we're defining that function here. And then we import some modules, some Python modules. The first one is the Nuke module, which has all of the Nuke specific functions in it. We also bring in the OS module, which has a lot of operating system specific things like reformatting file paths, being able to create file paths, that sort of stuff. And then also the error_no module. So the next step is we try to figure out what the file path is. So we use the Nuke module, and we try to find out the file name, the field file name in this node. So this node method of the Nuke module here. then we reformat the path so that it is appropriate for this file system. So we try to extract the directory path. So we look at the file, and then we strip off the directory path part using this method and put it in this variable. And then we reformat it to be the correct format for the operating system that we happen to be in. So we don't want to try to create a file path using the wrong type of separators and nomenclature. So this makes sure that it works for the operating system. Then we use os make dirs. We give it that directory that we figured out. And this is interesting. One of the things you can do in Python is you can try to do something, and if it doesn't work, you can handle the exception in various ways. So we don't even test to see if the directory already exists. Our test also happens to be an attempt at creating the directory when we write. So we say os make dirs, the name of the directory that we were able to extract. And then if that doesn't work, only if the error is that the file already exists, because that's an error that we don't care about. So we say, if the error is not the file already exists, the path already exists, then tell us what that error was. So for example, if we can't write to the path or something else. But if the file path already exists, then it'll ignore it as an error. And if it doesn't, then it'll tell us what the error was. And if it doesn't exist, obviously, when it tries to make it, it will just make it, and everything will be dandy. So that's the function right there, create write dir. So we define that function, and then we do that function here once it's been defined. Say, run that. So that's how the magic path creation works in the magic write nodes. And it's kind of a critical part of this automation, because if this wasn't here and we try to create this macro-like or this adaptive template Nuke script and we have it write to a path that doesn't exist already, the write node will choke. So this is an important part of that. If you want to learn more Python, I'm going to point you to some resources for learning Python in another video. But that's a quick walkthrough of what this does. As you can see, it might seem kind of tedious, but in fact, if this was the process that you were going to do as a human being, this is almost the same process you would do minus a couple of these housekeeping steps. You would check to see if the directory existed. If it didn't, then you would make one. So it's a pretty small function for what it does, and considering that once you created it, it will work every time. You could even copy and paste this one, or create similar things like this that go into a little library of functions that you can use for practical things. Learning a little bit of programming is really a pretty powerful skill that you can pick up. Okay, so let's test it. So let's use the same proxy spacepocalypse files that we're using as our input, and I've already set up a DOS key macro here for NukeX. So we'll do NukeX, and the frame range, big F, that we want to do. Remember, spacepocalypse is 1080 through 1500. We'll just do the first few frames. So let's say 1080 through 1100. And we need to run Nuke in interactive. We need to pull an interactive license, as we discovered earlier. And we want to execute this script, which is toMove3. Now I'm going to drag toMove3 over here to get the full path to it, because remember, now that we're not parked in the same directory as this, we need to give it a fully qualified path to this. And the same is true of the input and output files we want to do. So remember, ARGV0, which is the first additional argument we give it, is the input file, and ARGV1, which will be the output file. So we can also put the full path in there. We could alternatively here, we could have CD'd over to one of these directories, and we could have shortened that path. In fact, let's do that just to demonstrate that. I'm going to copy this just to keep it in memory, and then we're going to CD over to this path. So CD/D, just in case it's on a different drive. And we can drag from the Explorer here this icon and get that whole path. Now we're CD'd over into the directory where Spacepocalypse is. Now you see, because it puts it in the prompt, we're in the same situation where it's gotten really long. But let's paste our command and we'll keep building it up. We definitely need to get the full path to our script macro because we don't, we're not in the same directory, but we can skip that for the Spacepocalypse plate here. So I'm going to switch this over to details so we can see the name. And I'm just going to copy the name. So Control C to copy the name, and then right click. And we have to tell it how we're going to pad the numbers. We can either use pound symbols, hash symbols, or we can use C notation, F format C notation. I prefer that one, so I will use %04D for that notation. And then we need to tell it where we want to put this output. Now, we could put it in the same place by giving it just the name of the movie, and it will stuff that movie right back into this directory. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to just take this name, and because of the movie format we're doing, we can't get the alpha, so let's make sure that we don't put that in the name. Confuse ourselves. HDD, half HD, V10. And remember that we have the dot move in our script. So let's hit enter here and see how this goes. And we can see it actually failed because of our create write dir macro or script that we have in the write node. Let's try giving it the fully qualified path for our output here. So I'm going to put this here. Just going to drag a file over, and then I'll take the extension off of it, because remember, the extension is built automatically, and we'll see how this goes. There we go. So it wasn't happy because it had no path in front of that simple name, but when we did it this way, it because it had enough of a path for the create write dir to do a little bit of work, it didn't crap out. So that's one exception that this wasn't able to test for. Let's see if the movie successfully wrote. And there you have it. We have a movie that we were able to process with our little thing. And then this would work on any sequence of frames that you want to feed it, because Nuke should be able to automatically detect the extension and guess the color space for that coming in. Or you could hard code it into the read node if you really had to in your template file. So this is, now we've created a generic Nuke script that can be used in all sorts of different situations, just as a part of a command line workflow.